Hey everyone, Cleo here, and today I'm here with a tag video. So that is the TBR tag. Now the original creator, like the original page for this doesn't appear to be online anymore, but it was created by a blog called A Perfection Called Books. So I ran across this tag recently, but I don't really remember who I saw doing it, so my apologies for that. This is just going to be a little bit of a quick go through some of the books on my TBR and just talking about TBRs in general. I'm going to take TBR to mean the books that I physically own. I'm going to make an exception for one specific question. I did not include the books that are on my Kindle, and that tells you a lot about how I treat my Kindle, I guess. But so without further ado, let's just dive in. So the first question is, how do you keep track of your TBR pile? So at the moment I work with a TBR cart, so all of my books on my TBR are in a cart. Up until the point in which I got to 0 TBR at the end of June, I had an Excel file keeping track of all of the books that I physically own, but now I've switched that over into Notion. So on Notion I have a list of all of the books that I purchased since reaching 0 TBR, and then it is filtered so that the ones that I haven't finished yet are visible, and so that's how I keep track of my TBR. But as I said, I have it in two specific ways. I can see all of them together on the cart, and then I can see that list. There are also some physical books that I haven't read yet that I haven't really included into that list, but I'll talk about those at a later question. Is your TBR mostly print or ebook? So as I said, I kind of disregard the books that are on my Kindle, and I guess maybe in 2023 or so I need to make a little bit of a project out of that, because I am not treating them right. On my Kindle, I'm guessing there are about 30 to 40. I did the count at one point, but I don't really fully remember. That's somewhere around that number of ebooks, and definitely quite a few of those I'm really excited about. So I should really start to integrate them into my TBR list, but I haven't really thought about what that would mean for my maximum number of books. Do I want to have a very low number of physical and ebook, or can I allow myself a little bit more ebooks? I don't know. I haven't thought about that yet. At this point in time, the Kindle is basically something that I kind of ignore unless I want to read a book that I don't want to physically purchase. Third question, how do you determine which books from your TBR to read next? So there's no exact science to that, of course. Of course, if there are book clubs that I'm following and I have one of those books, then that book will be pushed forward. If I come across somebody hosting a read-along for a book that I own, I might also push it forward for that reason. But aside from that, it's basically just books battling out in my brain for which ones I want to read earliest. So for example, for the month of November, so I am going to Italy for 2 weeks. I know that I'll have a lot of reading time on the train to Venice, so I put a book on there that is Venetian inspired, because there's a link there, of course. It's also a book that I've been meaning to get around to for a long time, so I'm very happy that I finally found a reason to put it there. I am taking part in a read-along which is Once Upon a Readathon. One of the prompts is to read a book that features the words Once Upon a Time, and so I will be reading Once Upon a Time in the North for that particular reason. The Cat Lady Readathon is happening, and during that weekend I won't have time to read cat books, but I did want to take that opportunity to read them later in the month. So the two books that I have on my TBR that are cat based are also books that I'm planning to get to in November. There's a book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, which will be reading Gideon the Ninth, which is on my ebook TBR, so it makes it onto my November TBR. For the rest of November I have plans for the time that I'm in Italy, but I don't have those books yet. I will be buying those books in Italy, and then I'm expecting to have like a week, hopefully, in which I haven't had a book planned yet, in which I will just be able to mood read. So this is kind of how I've built my November TBR, but there is no real rhyme or reason. It is kind of what makes it to my top of priorities, and then part of those choices are definitely determined by read-alongs and readathons. Now, moving on into a few questions that highlight specific books on the TBR. So the first one is a book that's been on your TBR list the longest. Now, there are two ways to interpret this, and so I'm gonna start with the easiest one, which is the actual date in which it ended up on my physical TBR. I am gonna choose one of 17 books that ended on my TBR card at that point in time. Of those 17, I think at this point in time I have 9 or so, or 10 maybe, left. And so I'm gonna highlight Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari, because this is a book that has been on my radar for years. So even if we take the mental TBR sort of interpretation, this one is pretty high on my mental TBR. It has been on my radar for years. I've been meaning to pick it up for years. I've always been saying like, no, I have too many books unread on my shelves. I cannot like find the time for it now. And so now I have it and I still haven't gone around to it, but it definitely is one that I'm hoping to, I don't think it's gonna happen in 2022 actually, so I'm hoping early in 2023 Sapiens is gonna get read. But there are a few books that I physically own that aren't officially on my TBR, and they're all non-fiction books, and probably, and I guess at some point I need to start integrating them into my TBR to make sure that I actually read them. One of them is Jane Austen at Home by Lucy Worsley. So this is a non-fiction about the different homes that Jane Austen has inhabited and the way that they shaped her literature. I was contemplating getting rid of this, but then I did a try chapter tag with it and I really enjoyed the introduction to this work, so I do still want to give it a go. Next up we have a book that you recently added to your TBR. In comparison to a lot of booktubers, all of the books on my physical TBR are recent because the oldest one on there, it was added on July the 2nd, so it's been on there like 4 months or something like that. It's been on there like 119 days, I think, specifically at this point in time. But the most recent addition to my bookshelves is She and Her Cat by Makoto Shinkai and Naruki Nagakawa. This is a short story collection? Not really, it's like a collection. In any case, we're looking at different people in Tokyo and the ways that cats play a role in their lives. And so, yeah, I always love a good Japanese cat book. The Japanese just really know how to integrate cats into literature. There's just such a deep love for cats coming through Japanese literature, and so I'm very eager to get around to this one. A book in your TBR strictly there because of a beautiful cover. This is not exactly the reason why this book is on there, but to some extent. The book is on there because I wanted a beautiful edition of Babel by R.F. Kuang, and so I put myself on the waiting list for 2 subscriptions, for Illumicrate and for the Fairy Loot. And so for Illumicrate I was in time to get the Babel box. For Fairy Loot I was also in time for the Babel box, but I was early, so I have a book on there that I just got so that I would have a subscription by the time that Babel in August came around. So would I have this book otherwise? No. So I have this book purely because I wanted a beautiful edition of Babel, and so that's my closest interpretation, which is The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy by Megan Bannon, which is this beautiful Fairy Loot edition. This is a fantasy romance, which I believe is kind of like a fantasy romance version of You've Got Mail. And you need to say no more because I love You've Got Mail. But if I had not had the Fairy Loot, then would I have gotten this book? No. Have I picked it up since? No. Have I been tempted to put it on TBR? Yes, but not tempted enough to actually prioritize it. So I don't know when it's gonna get read. I do expect to like it. I do expect to potentially love it because I love You've Got Mail, but it's also a danger when you love a certain piece of media too much and then something is inspired by it. It can be really disappointing. I do want to read it, but I probably would not have gotten it physically if it weren't for the Fairy Loot. A book on your TBR that you never plan on reading. So I don't have any of those, but what I will add here is there are some books on my physical shelves that I don't add to my TBR, usually non-fiction as I said, and they're almost always these types of books that I don't plan to go through in one go, with the exception of the Jane Austen book that I shared earlier. But so this, for example, is a non-fiction talking about a new sort of like nutritional model, which is like a food hourglass. So it's explaining that system and giving nutritional information and stuff like that. This would very much be the type of book that I might browse on occasion or maybe like consult for certain things, but it's definitely not something that I will read front to back. Every single page of this book will not get read, so that is the closest I can get to this particular prompt, because I've gotten rid of all the books on my TBR that I had no interest in, and at this point in time my TBR is fresh and it's books that I will definitely be getting around to. Next up we have an unpublished book on your TBR that you're excited about. Now, I do have some arcs, but I'm late for most of my arcs. I think I have 2 remaining arcs at this point in time that need to still get published. And to be fair, both of them I've kind of forgotten what they're about. So in principle I don't have anything for this particular prompt. I know of books that I will be adding to my TBR the moment they come out that I'm excited for. For example, the top book that I'm currently like waiting for is The Battle Drum by Sada El Arifi, which is the sequel to The Final Strife, which will be coming in like June next year probably. A book on your TBR that basically everyone has read except for you. So yeah, don't really have any examples of that. A book that I'll mention for the next one kind of can fit in here because it's a book that I do see a lot of people reading, but on the other hand it is also still very much underrated. A really popular one that I have on my Kindle would be Legends and Lattes by Travis something. I guess that would be the Kindle book that is like the most popular. I think that that is like the biggest like hyped book. Then we get to a book on your TBR that everyone recommends, and here is the book that I wanted to kind of answer the last question with, but it's also still, it's an indie book, it's very much underrated. It's just one that I am so excited about, and every time I see it mentioned I'm like, yeah, I want to get to that book. And that is The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang, which was gifted to me by Tufty. So this one is definitely, I've said in previous videos that I plan to make this the first book that I read in 2023, but I actually have a new plan for it, which would mean that I will read it at the very end of 2022. So yeah, this is a book that is definitely niche to the fantasy community, and in the fantasy community not everyone will have read it, but when it comes to the bigger like fantasy YouTube creators, they have all kind of read this one, love this one. I see this recommended constantly, I want to read it, and hopefully I will also absolutely fall in love with this one. Second to last question, a book that you're dying to get to. I mean, a lot of the books on my TBR, I'm dying to get to them, but the one that I'm going to mention is just one that I consider to be one of my most anticipated reads. At the beginning of the year, when I knew that this book was coming out, I was like, oh, I cannot wait for it. I was like eagerly awaiting its publication, and then I've since still not started this one. And that would be Live Ceremony by Sayaka Murata. So I absolutely adore Sayaka Murata's 2 previous works. This is a short story collection, so a little bit less my thing, and maybe that is part of the reason why I still haven't picked it up, because I'm always prioritizing stories over short stories. But yeah, I would be absolutely over the moon if I could still fit this into 2022. I don't particularly think it has that priority, but on the other hand, I'm kind of battling myself with that because I don't have as high expectations for this one because of it being a short story collection. At the same time, because it's Sayaka Murata, I'm like, but I will probably absolutely love this, so I should just read it. So yeah, this is one that I'm conflicted about in that sense, but yeah, I do expect to have an absolutely great time with this one. And so I'm just kind of battling my own short story prejudices or assumptions when it comes to this book. And then the final one is, how many books do you have on your TBR? And so here I should probably maybe give you the Kindle stats as well, right? Because I don't even know those. So let me just get my notion there. I think it's 26 at this point in time. Books on my physical TBR, that is. Yeah, so currently on my physical TBR there are 26 books with an average age of 95 days, actually 96 when rounded up. So I was hoping to keep them lower. Like officially my goal was just to read them within a year, and I'm still very much on track for that. But somewhere down the line, if this grew into more of a, it's a shame if they are on there for longer than 100 days. But at this point in time, the majority of my list is over or very close to that 100 days point of reference, so maybe I need to stick to the 1 year rule, but in any case we'll see. If my TBR goes down as I'm planning to, maybe it'll be more achievable to keep it under 100 days. But so yeah, that is the physical TBR side of things. In terms of like the physical books that I don't really count for my TBR, I guess they're like under 10 even, like there may be like 6 of them I guess. But as I said, they are mostly sort of books that you don't really read from front to cover. There's one that's called like 101 Whiskeys to Drink Before You Die, for example. And then the Kindle that I have to manually count. So the Kindle is a combination of books that I bought on Kindle, a subscription that I had, and then also the ARCs that I have access to that I haven't read yet. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Why is this not? Yeah, that's correct. Start over. 1, 2, 3, 40. Okay, so there are 40 books on my Kindle at this point in time. So yeah, 26 plus 40, 66 I guess if you're counting my overall TBR, which means that 2023 definitely needs to be a year in which I also slim down that Kindle TBR. The majority of these are pretty recent to my TBR. Some of them just got on there because I was too weak. Some books were like free at a certain point in time, in which I was like, oh, like let's just add them to my TBR, but now they're not the books that I'm most excited about and I have them there. Others are from a subscription, but I never read them because I was prioritizing zero TBR. A few classics on there that, you know, I might as well discount from these numbers because they're the type of books that I want to eventually read but not necessarily prioritize. But I also didn't want to kick them off of my Kindle TBR because I was like, yeah, but I do want to one day read this book. So yeah, so the Kindle, like the stats aren't horrible or anything like that. It's just 40 books on there, so it's not, it's doable, you know, it's not out of control, but I would still like to trim it down a little bit more and integrate those books into my TBR, into my reading life a little bit better. But so yeah, that was a TBR tag. I hope you found this one interesting. If you've been on my channel for a while, then you will have noticed that I'm not sharing TBR videos anymore at this point in time, and I'm actually quite enjoying that, so probably I will refrain from TBR videos in the future. I'm kinda enjoying keeping my TBR to myself and then just, you know, surprising you with what I'm reading throughout the month or in my wrap-ups, and you know, that kind of takes some of the pressure of a TBR off of me, which it shouldn't, you know. I should just be able to, like, none of you are seriously gonna come at me for not reading the books that I said I was gonna on my TBR, but still, having communicated it to the wide world makes me somehow feel like I need to stick to it, whereas if I make a plan for myself, I'm more likely to kind of bend it a little bit as I go through the month. But so yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. See you guys for the next one. Bye!